Before we begin this journey, a whisper of hope and resilience. Consider subscribing to our channel and turning on notifications. Every story we share is crafted to touch your heart, and we wouldn't want you to miss a single one. Now, dim the lights, settle in, and let's step into a world where a janitor's gentle hand and a mother's evolving heart reshape a little girl's silent world. Sir, step back. She'll bite. The security guard's voice, raw and strained, cracked like a whip through the cavernous marble lobby of Wardcore Biotech. The harsh sound ricocheted off the polished surfaces, cutting through the meticulously maintained silence that usually permeated the corporate stronghold. Lucas Hale, midway through polishing a particularly stubborn smudge on the gleaming floor, froze. Instinctively, his hand tightened around the mop handle, the worn wood suddenly feeling like a shield against the palpable tension that had erupted. His eyes, quick and observant, darted towards the source of the commotion. At the very center of the opulent space, dwarfed by the towering grandeur of the architecture and a colossal, abstract corporate sculpture that seemed to loom over everything, sat a small girl. Her pale blonde hair, almost white in the stark overhead lighting, framed a face that was utterly blank, devoid of any discernible emotion. She sat directly on the cold marble floor, a defiant, fragile presence, her arms wrapped tightly around her knees, her small body rocking rhythmically back and forth. It was a self-soothing motion, a desperate attempt to create order in an internal chaos that was invisible to all but the most observant. Her eyes, however, betrayed the carefully constructed facade of blankness. They darted rapidly, like trapped birds frantically searching for an escape, reflecting the anxious, suited faces of the 5 executives who stood awkwardly around her, seemingly paralyzed by her distress. One woman, her meticulously styled hair slightly disheveled, whispered urgently into her phone, her voice a barely audible tremor. "She's having another episode. Where's her nanny?" The girl's soft, insistent humming, a low, wordless melody, was almost entirely drowned out by the imposing silence of the building, a silence that felt less peaceful and more like an oppressive, watchful entity. Lucas, a man whose life had been reduced to the quiet rhythms of cleaning and the echoes of a past he couldn't quite shake, took a slow, deliberate step forward. The squeak of his worn-out janitor's boots on the pristine marble was surprisingly loud in the hushed tension. "May I?" he asked, his voice calm, a stark contrast to the guard's agitated tone. His offer, simple yet profound, seemed to cut through the executive's paralysis. The security guard, a burly man whose uniform seemed stretched tight across his muscular frame, immediately blocked Lucas with an outstretched arm. His face was a mask of warning. "That's the ward girl," he hissed, his words laced with a mixture of fear, caution, and a palpable sense of corporate anxiety. "Don't get involved. Seriously. The last guy who tried to intervene was fired on the spot. You don't want to cross Mayline Ward." But Lucas wasn't listening to the guard's warnings, nor was he paying attention to the hushed, urgent conversations of the executives, or the silent, persistent blink of the security camera's red light, a digital eye recording every detail. His focus, unwavering and absolute, was fixed solely on the girl. He watched her with an intensity born of experience, an understanding that transcended the superficial. He noticed the delicate way her slender fingers tapped the marble floor, a complex, almost musical rhythm that only she seemed to hear, a private language spoken in silence. He observed the subtle tremor that ran through her small frame, the barely perceptible quickening of her breath with every hesitant footstep that came too close, every perceived encroachment on her fragile bubble of self-preservation. It was a raw, visceral reaction, a testament to an unseen struggle. "I'm not going to talk to her," Lucas stated, his voice a steady, grounding presence that seemed to soothe the frayed nerves in the immediate vicinity. "I'm just going to sit." And with that quiet, determined declaration, he did. He lowered himself slowly, deliberately, onto the cold marble floor, his movements unhurried, unflustered by the weighty presence of the corporate power players around him. He positioned himself a respectful 5 feet away from her, a non-threatening distance that offered presence without demanding interaction. Still clad in his faded janitor's uniform, its fabric worn smooth from countless washes, his boots scuffed and battered from endless shifts, he reached into the cavernous depths of his work cart. From amidst the cleaning supplies, the industrial-strength detergents and scrub brushes, he extracted a small, translucent plastic bottle of dish soap. Then, with a wordless grace that belied his rough exterior, a quiet poetry in his movements, he dipped his fingers into the lukewarm, soapy water from his mop bucket. It was a simple act, devoid of pretension or expectation, an offering of nothing but itself. He brought his wet fingers to his lips and began to blow bubbles. One, then two, then three. Each iridescent sphere, fragile and ephemeral, caught the harsh overhead lights, reflecting miniature, distorted rainbows on its shimmering surface, momentarily transforming the sterile grandeur of the lobby into a canvas of fleeting beauty. The effect was immediate and profound. The girl stilled, her rocking motion gradually, almost imperceptibly, slowing to a halt. Her soft, insistent humming, which had been a constant, low thrum, softened, fading into a barely audible whisper, then into silence. Her darting eyes, which had been so full of trapped anxiety, now watched, transfixed, as the delicate, shimmering bubbles floated lazily into the air. Some popped with a soft, almost inaudible sigh, vanishing into nothingness as quickly as they appeared. Others, more resilient, drifted lazily upward, buoyed by unseen currents, ascending towards the towering ceiling like secrets refusing to land, defying gravity and the grim expectations of the moment. Lucas didn't look at her. He didn't attempt to make eye contact, didn't ask questions, didn't demand a response, didn't even acknowledge her presence directly. He simply kept blowing bubbles, a silent offering, an unspoken invitation, a quiet presence in her turbulent world. From the mezzanine above, a silent sentinel in a world of power and privilege, Mayline Ward stood. Her tailored heels clicked with a sharp, almost aggressive precision against the polished floor, a sound that usually announced her formidable presence. Her slate grey coat, a garment of exquisite craftsmanship that cost more than Lucas's monthly rent, exuded an aura of undeniable wealth and controlled power. Her blonde hair, meticulously styled into a tight, severe bun, reflected the controlled precision that governed every aspect of her life. Her arms were crossed, a familiar, almost habitual stance of authority and guardedness. But her eyes, usually icy and calculating, were no longer focused on the distant city skyline, the day's financial reports, or the countless screens that displayed the global reach of her empire. They were fixed, with an intensity that bordered on desperation, on the improbable scene unfolding below. Mayline Ward, billionaire CEO of WardCore Biotech, a woman who had commanded rooms full of world leaders, negotiated multi-billion-dollar deals, and crushed hostile takeovers before her second cup of coffee, now found herself utterly disarmed, rendered speechless and breathless by the simple act of a janitor blowing bubbles. Watching him, a man whose existence had been utterly invisible to her moments before, calm her daughter with nothing but soap bubbles, a profound, unsettling realization washed over her. She could barely breathe, her meticulously constructed world suddenly feeling fragile, transparent. Eva, her daughter, her mystery, her burden. The label, the specialist, the endless rounds of therapy, the exorbitant costs, none of it had achieved what this ordinary man had. And the janitor, what was his name? Hale. Lucas Hale. The name echoed in her mind, a jarring intrusion into her meticulously ordered and emotion-proofed world. A strange, unfamiliar warmth, a prickle of something akin to hope, stirred within her. Mayline made a decision. She took the elevator down, the descent a silent, steel-encased journey from her ivory tower to the mundane, yet suddenly profound, reality of the lobby floor. When the polished doors slid open with a soft sigh, she stepped into the space like a queen surveying a battlefield, her presence immediately shifting the energy of the room, drawing all eyes. The hushed conversation ceased. The guard straightened. The executives snapped to attention. "Mr. Hale," she said crisply, her voice accustomed to commanding immediate attention, every syllable imbued with authority. Lucas stood slowly, deliberately, his movements unhurried, unflustered by her formidable presence. He met her gaze with a quiet dignity that was disarming. "Ma'am," he acknowledged, his gaze briefly, gently flicking to Eva. The girl was now lying on her side on the marble floor, completely calm. Her earlier distress vanished. Her large blue eyes, no longer darting like trapped birds, were peacefully following a single, persistent bubble as it hovered just above her face, a fragile globe reflecting the world in miniature, distorted but beautiful. "I don't," Lucas began, a quiet explanation forming on his lips, perhaps to clarify his actions, but Mayline cut him off, her tone sharp, impatient, devoid of patience for niceties. "I wasn't asking," she stated, her gaze unwavering, making it clear this was not a request but a command. Then, turning to the bewildered security guard, her voice regaining its usual steel, she barked, "Call Dr. Sharma. Have him check on Eva immediately. Tell him it's urgent." Without waiting to see if Lucas followed, or for any further questions, she turned, her heels clicking a staccato rhythm on the marble floor, and walked with brisk efficiency towards the private elevators that led to her executive suite. He did follow, a quiet, observant shadow trailing in her powerful wake, a silent acceptance of her abrupt command. The marble lobby, once a stage for chaos, settled back into its cold, silent grandeur. But something fundamental had shifted within its walls. The echo of those bubbles and the profound calm they brought lingered in the air, a silent promise of change. "I don't need you to fix her." The words, sharp and precise, cut through the plush silence of Mayline Ward's penthouse office. This was not a greeting, nor a casual conversation, but a preemptive strike, a statement delivered with the surgical precision of a CEO accustomed to controlling every narrative. Lucas Hale paused in the threshold of her inner sanctum, his daughter Becca's small hand wrapped securely in his. The marble foyer of the penthouse, through which they had just passed, was an imposing expanse of white walls, glass railings, and sharp, minimalist edges, a monument to stark precision and undeniable power. It was a space designed for looking out, for conquering the world, not for nurturing soft emotions or quiet connections. Lucas's worn work boots, typically silent on office carpets, squeaked faintly on the polished marble, a jarring, almost defiant sound in the oppressive opulence. He scanned the room, noting the absence of any personal touches, any warmth. It felt less like a home and more like a carefully curated gallery. "I don't fix children," Lucas replied quietly, his voice a steady counterpoint to her brittle tone. "They're not broken." He met her gaze, his own eyes calm and unwavering, conveying a profound truth that seemed to momentarily disarm her. Mayline blinked, a fleeting flicker of something unreadable surprise, perhaps, or a flicker of an emotion long suppressed crossing her features. "Just once," she began, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, a familiar defensive posture that spoke volumes about her internal guard. A muscle ticked almost imperceptibly along her jawline, betraying the tight leash she kept on her emotions. "She's in her room," Mayline finally conceded, her voice a little softer, a fraction less commanding than before. "Through the hall on the left." Lucas turned to Becca, crouching down so their eyes were level. Becca, her own eyes wide with awe and a touch of trepidation at the sheer scale of the apartment, squeezed his hand reassuringly. "You okay to draw for a bit, Bug?" he asked, his voice soft, a familiar comfort. Becca nodded, pulling a roll of crayons and a small, well-loved sketch pad from her worn backpack. "Is she the quiet girl?" Becca whispered, her voice hushed, instinctively understanding the gravity of the situation, the delicacy required. Lucas smiled, a gentle warmth in his eyes. "The very one." "Then I'll be quiet, too," Becca promised, her small face serious. She tiptoed towards a distant corner of the vast living room, her tiny figure almost swallowed by the immensity of the space, moving as if it were a library made of clouds, where every sound was amplified, every movement significant. Mayline watched the exchange between father and daughter, an unreadable expression on her face. It was a blend of curiosity, a hint of envy, and a reluctant admiration for the easy, unspoken bond she witnessed. "She's obedient," Mayline noted, a touch of her usual analytical assessment in her tone, as if categorizing Becca's behavior. "She's kind," Lucas corrected gently, his voice firm but devoid of challenge, a subtle redefinition of value. Then, without waiting for explicit permission, he walked down the hall, Becca's earlier description of him as the quiet girl's father resonating with a deeper meaning. The door to Eva's room was ajar, a narrow sliver of light spilling into the polished hallway. He knocked gently, a soft tap that would not startle, before pushing it open further. The room was a palace, a child's sanctuary designed with an adult's impeccable taste and limitless budget. Tall windows framed a breathtaking panoramic view of the city, its endless grid of lights a distant, shimmering tapestry, veiled by sheer white curtains that billowed almost imperceptibly with the gentle currents of the air conditioning. Toys, meticulously chosen and undoubtedly expensive, were lined up with military precision on pristine shelves, each item seemingly untouched, more for display than for the joyful chaos of play. And there, curled in the corner like a fragile question mark, was Eva. Her pale blonde head was pressed against the window pane, her small body curled tightly, watching the bustling city below as if its very existence depended on her unblinking gaze, as if it might vanish if she dared to blink. Lucas didn't speak. He understood, instinctively, the sanctity of her silence, the profound fragility of her peace. He sat down slowly, deliberately, his movements unhurried and non-intrusive, positioning himself about 10 feet away from her. It was a respectful distance, ensuring he didn't intrude on her private world, a gentle acknowledgement of her need for space. From the inner pocket of his worn jacket, He pulled out a small, unassuming notepad and a pencil. Without a word, without a glance in her direction, he began to draw. Simple strokes, quiet lines, 5 lines, a circle, some stars. H. E made no sound, no sudden movements, his presence a soft, unspoken anchor in the quiet room. Eva didn't turn. She didn't acknowledge his presence, didn't seem to notice him at all. The only sounds were the distant hum of the city, the whisper of the air conditioning, and, within the opulent room, the surprisingly loud, rhythmic tick-tock of a clock, its insistent tempo a stark reminder of time passing in such a rich, yet profoundly silent, hum. After 3 minutes, a deliberate interval, Lucas held the sketch up slightly, just enough for her to catch it in her peripheral vision if she chose to. Then, with the same quiet grace, he set it down beside him on the floor and waited. Nothing. Just the persistent ticking of the clock, a relentless march through the quiet. Then a shift, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement. Eva rose without a word, her steps slow, deliberate, almost bird-like, as if she were walking on air, carefully navigating the precise arrangement of toys and furniture. She crossed the pristine room, her small hand reaching out with a delicate, almost reverent touch, picked up the paper, and then, to Mayline's utter astonishment, sat down right next to him. Mayline, who had been watching silently through the narrow crack of the door, her breath held, covered her mouth with her hand. It was a raw, primal gesture of disbelief, of dawning hope so profound it almost hurt. She hadn't seen Eva willingly sit beside anyone in nearly a year, not a nanny, not a specialist, not even her own mother. Lucas, ever attuned to the delicate balance of the moment, didn't look at the child. He simply began a new sketch. This time, a bubble floating above a girl's head, simple and evocative, a silent continuation of the thread they had begun in the lobby. Eva, still silent, reached for a crayon, her slender fingers, which had been tapping out unheard rhythms just days before, now tracing tentative lines on the paper. Not a word was spoken, not a command given, not an expectation laid. And yet, something sacred was unfolding between them, a wordless, weightless connection, impossible to interrupt, profound in its simplicity. It was a conversation spoken in colors and shared stillness. 15 minutes later, Lucas emerged from the room, leaving behind a profound peace. Mayline was waiting for him, her arms still crossed, a defensive posture that was now subtly altered. Her face, usually a mask of impenetrable control, had softened, the icy CEO facade subtly cracked, revealing a glimpse of the raw, vulnerable mother beneath. "She drew with you," she said, her voice hushed, almost disbelieving, as if needing to hear herself say it, to confirm the impossible. "She started the conversation," Lucas replied, his voice calm, explaining a truth beyond mere words. Mayline's brow furrowed, a faint line of confusion. "She didn't say a word." "Talking and communicating," Lucas said gently, his gaze steady, profound, "aren't always the same thing." Mayline didn't answer. Instead, she turned and walked into the vast, gleaming kitchen, a space more suited for catering staff or elaborate corporate entertaining than for a mother preparing a simple drink. "Would you like something to drink?" she asked, her voice still a little tight, a fragile attempt at normalcy. "Water's fine," Lucas replied. She poured it herself, not through an automated machine, not with the assistance of a retinue of household staff, but with her own hands, filling a crystal glass. Her movements, for once, seemed deliberate and surprisingly steady. "I don't know how to reach her," she said, sliding the water across the polished counter, her voice a raw, unvarnished confession. Lucas didn't pick it up immediately. His gaze was thoughtful, direct. "Have you tried letting her reach you?" Mayline stiffened, her defensive walls immediately rising again, a subtle but palpable shift in her demeanor. "I've done everything a mother can do," she retorted, her voice regaining its sharp edge. "Therapy, nutrition, sleep specialists, speech pathologists. I flew in a behavioral therapist from Sweden who charges $30,000 a week." Lucas finally picked up the water and took a slow sip, the coolness a welcome contrast to the rising tension. "Sounds like you've hired a lot of people to talk to her," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But who listens?" "I listen," she snapped, her voice rising, edged with desperation and a flicker of anger. "I rearranged my entire life for her." "Did you rearrange your heart?" The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was hollow, a vast, echoing emptiness, like the profound silence that follows a sudden, undeniable truth. It was the echo of a question she hadn't wanted to hear, a truth she had buried deep beneath layers of work, ambition, and carefully constructed corporate identity. "She was 2 when she stopped talking," Mayline whispered, her voice barely audible, a fragile thread of memory unraveling. One day she was babbling, saying colors, giggling at birds. The next, nothing. Not even eye contact. Lucas leaned on the counter, his presence a quiet anchor in her storm. What happened? Mayline's eyes flickered, a momentary, profound vulnerability. A medical reaction. Vaccine schedule, a high fever. The doctor said it was coincidence, not causation. But I kept asking, was it my fault? Did I miss something? Lucas nodded, a silent acknowledgement of a universal parental burden, a guilt that transcends reason. Parents always do, even when it's not theirs to carry. Just then, Becca wandered into the kitchen, a small, vibrant presence. She held up her drawing, a simple picture of 3 stick figures, her dad, and a girl with big, innocent eyes. I made this for her, Becca said, her voice soft and earnest, an unselfish offer from one child to another, but only if she wants it. Mayline looked down at the drawing, surprised by the simple grace in the little girl's voice, the profound lack of expectation. Would it be all right if Eva joined us for dinner sometime? Lucas asked, gently pushing the boundary, extending the fragile connection they had just forged. Dinner? Mayline's tone sharpened, a swift return to her wary, protective self. In a public place? No. Here, Lucas said, his voice reassuring, steady, safe, familiar. If she sees Becca eating, she may feel invited. I'm not hosting playdates, Mayline replied tightly, the word playdate sounding alien and frivolous in her meticulously ordered, high-stakes world. Lucas didn't flinch, didn't retract his offer. I'm not asking for a playdate. I'm offering her a doorway. Mayline folded her arms again, but something in her posture was subtly different now. Less defiance, more a profound, underlying fear. I'm afraid of doing it wrong, she admitted, almost inaudibly, a raw confession that revealed the desperate, vulnerable mother beneath the formidable CEO. I don't know how to be the kind of mother she needs. Lucas set his glass down, his gaze unwavering, understanding the depth of her struggle. Then it's a good thing she doesn't need perfection, he said, his voice gentle but firm, cutting through her self-imposed pressure. She just needs you to stop trying so hard to be a CEO around her. That line hung in the air like a dropped crown, a profound challenge to her very identity, to the way she had lived her entire adult life. Lucas turned towards the door, signaling their departure. We'll be here next Friday around 5. She doesn't eat lobster, Mayline called after him, a surprising, almost desperate detail, a glimpse into her knowledge of Eva's specific needs, despite her emotional distance. Lucas smiled faintly, a genuine, warm smile touching his lips. Neither do we. As the heavy door closed behind them, Mayline stared down at Becca's drawing, still on the counter. 3 people holding hands, one bubble floating above them all, a single caption written in crayon, safe. She traced the word with her finger, the simple, childlike scrawl a balm to her troubled soul, a whisper of a possibility she hadn't dared to dream. For the first time in a long time, amidst the sterile grandeur of her penthouse, she didn't feel like crying. She felt like listening. And in that listening, a seed of something new began to grow. Do all rich people live in museums? Becca's voice, a soft, innocent question, echoed through the grand foyer of the Ward penthouse. Her sneakers, though worn, squeaked faintly against the glossy marble floor, the sound surprisingly loud in the vast, almost sterile emptiness of the space. Lucas chuckled, a warm, resonant sound that filled the cavernous room, steadying a paper bag in one hand and a neatly folded picnic blanket in the other. He glanced around at the towering, minimalist walls, the sparse, artful furniture that looked more like sculptural installations than comfortable seating. Not all of them, he replied, a playful glint in his eye. Just the ones who forgot what a living room is for. As if summoned by his gentle critique, Mayline appeared at the top of the sweeping staircase. Today, she was a stark contrast to the formidable CEO Lucas had first encountered. Barefoot, her blonde hair loosely tied back in a casual ponytail, a few strands escaping to frame her face, there was a rare softness in her posture, a subtle relaxation of the rigid lines she usually presented to the world. Her clothing was simple, a navy t-shirt and dark, comfortable slacks utterly devoid of the power suits and tailored precision that defined her public persona. I heard that, she said, a hint of genuine amusement in her voice, a lightness Lucas hadn't expected, a sound that seemed to chase away some of the cold silence. Becca blushed, a faint rose spreading across her cheeks. Sorry, ma'am. Mayline smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes, crinkling the corners. No apology needed. You're right. This place has too many walls and not enough warmth. Lucas raised an eyebrow, a silent acknowledgement of her surprising candor. That sounded dangerously close to self-awareness, a vulnerability he rarely glimpsed in her, a crack in the formidable armor. Mayline descended the stairs, her bare feet silent on the marble, a graceful movement that held a new, unpolished beauty. Don't get used to it, she added, a faint, familiar edge returning to her voice, as if to remind herself, and him, that she was still Mayline Ward, still wary of letting her guard down entirely. They gathered in Eva's room as the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. The golden light of the fading day softened the harsh edges of the meticulously arranged space, casting a warm glow on the pristine surfaces. Lucas, with an almost ritualistic care, spread the bright, patterned picnic blanket over the pristine floor, creating an island of warmth and color amidst the cool whites and grays of the room. Becca, with the quiet efficiency of a child on a mission, arranged small bowls of snacks. Grapes, cheese cubes, crackers, all chosen with careful consideration for Eva's sensitivities. Nothing hot, nothing with strong, overwhelming smells, everything soft, everything safe. Foods that wouldn't trigger her delicate sensory system. Eva sat in her usual corner, legs tucked under her like a porcelain doll left behind, her small body curled into itself, a silent sentinel watching the world outside her window. But her eyes weren't blank this time. They followed Becca's every movement, a spark of curiosity, a flicker of engagement, a nascent interest that hinted at a stirring within. Lucas sat down cross-legged on the blanket, a small Bluetooth speaker in hand, and tapped his phone. A soft piano melody, Debussy's Clair de Lune, slow and lilting, drifted through the room, a gentle invitation to peace, to a shared moment of stillness. Becca, ever intuitive, ever observant, placed a blank sketch pad between herself and Eva, a wordless offering of shared creativity, a silent invitation to collaborate. Then, quietly, without pressure, she began drawing. A simple tree, then a vibrant sun, then a small girl with flowing hair under the branches, her imagination unfolding on the page. She didn't speak. She didn't look at Eva, didn't pressure her for interaction, didn't demand a response. She just drew, creating a silent world that might just entice Eva to enter. Eva watched, her gaze fixed on Becca's flowing lines, her fingers twitching almost imperceptibly, a subtle echo of the rhythm only she could hear, a suppressed desire to join in. Lucas opened a tin of crayons, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the sterile white of the room, a small riot of potential. Blue first, he said gently, his voice a low, reassuring murmur, placing the blue crayon closer to Eva than to anyone else, a direct, personal invitation, a subtle prompt. Mayline watched from the doorway, her arms crossed, but not in defiance this time. Her posture was one of defense, but what she was defending, she wasn't sure. Perhaps her own fragile hope, a tender shoot she wasn't ready to acknowledge, wasn't ready to risk. Eva leaned forward, an inch, then another, her small body taut with anticipation, a profound internal struggle playing out on her features. She reached for the blue crayon, her fingers trembling slightly, barely breathing, as if even the slightest sound, the softest whisper, might shatter the delicate moment, might break the spell. Then, with a soft, decisive swish, her crayon touched the paper. She began to draw. No one said a word, not even Becca, who continued her own drawing, maintaining the sacred quiet. Just the faint, rhythmic whisper of wax on paper, the soft breathing of a girl rediscovering her voice, her connection through color. Lucas turned to Mayline, his voice a low, almost reverent whisper, his eyes conveying a profound truth. This is what safety looks like. It doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives with stillness. Mayline swallowed hard, her throat tight with emotion, a lump of unexpressed feelings rising within her. Why doesn't she talk to me? She asked, her voice barely audible, a raw, vulnerable question that pierced through her usual composure. Lucas didn't look at her, his gaze still fixed on Eva's concentrated face, on the profound act unfolding before them. Because you don't sit on the floor, he replied simply, a profound truth delivered without judgment, a quiet indictment of her corporate distance. An hour passed like a hymn, a quiet, peaceful melody echoing in the heart of the penthouse, filling it with a different kind of richness. No outbursts, no rocking, just the gentle sounds of crayons on paper, the soft strains of piano music, and the shared, comfortable silence. Eva even accepted a grape from Becca's outstretched hand, a small miracle wrapped in silence, a testament to the trust building between them, a tangible bridge between two worlds. Becca giggled, a pure, innocent sound that was like a burst of sunlight. She likes me. She does, Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion, a quiet triumph, a validation of Becca's gentle spirit. She's choosing you. Eva drew 3 stick figures on her paper. One with glasses, simple and clear. One with curly hair, flowing and free. One with a tight bun, meticulously neat. Becca, with her usual directness and insightful perception, pointed to each figure in turn. That's me, that's Daddy, and that's your mom. Eva didn't answer. She just colored the third figure's dress red, a vibrant, bold splash of color against the white paper, a color that stood out, demanding attention. Mayline stepped forward, her heart thumping in her chest, a fragile hope blossoming within her, a memory stirring. That used to be my favorite color, she said softly, her voice barely a whisper, a tremor of emotion. Eva paused, her hand hovering over the paper, her blue eyes, for the first time, meeting her mother's. Then, in the quietest voice imaginable, a sound so faint it was almost lost in the stillness, she whispered, "Still is." Mayline's knees gave out. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her hand instinctively covering her mouth, a raw, primal gesture of disbelief and profound emotion. Her breath trembled like a violin string pulled too tight, on the verge of breaking. Lucas didn't move, didn't intrude on the raw, sacred moment. He knew that sometimes healing sounded like a whisper. Sometimes it looked like a crayon, and sometimes it looked like a mother, brought to her knees by a single, simple word. Later that evening, Lucas stood in the hallway, carefully folding the bright picnic blanket, its colors a memory of the shared warmth. The remnants of their shared meal were packed away, the quiet rhythm of domesticity a stark contrast to the corporate world that usually dominated this space. Mayline approached, holding 2 steaming mugs of tea, the fragrant steam rising in the cool air. She called it red, she said, her voice still laced with wonder, a profound disbelief. She hasn't labeled anything in over 2 years. She didn't label it, Lucas corrected gently, his gaze soft. She remembered it. Big difference. Mayline handed him a mug, the warmth seeping into his hands, a welcome comfort. You think I missed all of this because I didn't sit on the floor? I think, Lucas said gently, meeting her gaze, his eyes holding a quiet wisdom. You've been standing so long you forgot how to kneel. She laughed once, a dry, sharp sound, devoid of humor, but full of a newfound self-awareness, a painful but necessary realization. That's poetic. It's also true. They stood in silence, the quiet comfort between them a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of the penthouse, a new kind of intimacy taking root. Then Mayline asked, her voice softer, more vulnerable than he had ever heard it, stripped bare of all pretense. Were you always this gentle? Lucas looked at her, a distant look in his eyes, remembering a different life, a different man. No, I used to fix things. That was my job. My wife was the gentle one. What happened to her? Mayline asked, a genuine curiosity, a rare empathy in her tone. Leukemia. 4 years ago she was diagnosed, and then she was gone before I could memorize the way she said goodbye. Mayline blinked, her own eyes softening with a rare, shared pain, a deep understanding of loss. I'm sorry. She used to say something whenever our daughter had a hard day, Lucas added, his gaze distant, lost in memory. She'd say, don't raise your voice, lower your body. Mayline stared at her tea, absorbing the quiet wisdom, the profound simplicity of the advice. Maybe I've been doing both wrong. Lucas smiled faintly, a gentle, understanding smile. You're here. That's not nothing. She met his gaze for the first time, not as a CEO, not as a woman in control, but as a mother, frightened, flawed, and aching to get it right, to bridge the chasm that had formed between her and her daughter. I want to learn, she said, the words of raw plea, a surrender of her usual command. Lucas nodded, a silent acknowledgement of her vulnerability, her courage. Then start by asking her favorite color tomorrow, even if you already know the answer. That night, Mayline watched Eva sleep, her tiny fingers still wrapped loosely around the blue crayon, a silent testament to the day's small miracles, to the thread of connection that had been woven. I never knew silence could be so loud, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, a profound realization echoing in the quiet room, filling it with a new kind of sound. Down the hall, Lucas kissed Becca's forehead as she drifted off to sleep on the guest bed, a rare treat for his daughter. He looked out the window at the glowing skyline, the city a vibrant tapestry of light and shadow, and whispered back, a profound truth delivered into the night, into the vastness of the urban landscape. Sometimes silence is just love waiting for room. A new kind of room, a new kind of love, slowly finding its place in their lives. Tell me again why we're doing this. Lucas adjusted the collar of his only ironed shirt, a faint, stubborn crease clinging to the fabric despite his efforts. He glanced at Becca through the rearview mirror. His daughter was practically vibrating with excitement in the back seat, her arms wrapped tightly around a zippered tote bag, its contents a carefully guarded mystery. Because it's polite to accept dinner invitations, Becca stated matter-of-factly, her voice holding the unwavering conviction of a child. And because Miss Eva asked if I'd come back. Lucas smiled, a warmth spreading through him despite the nervous flutter in his stomach. Dinner at the Ward penthouse. It still felt surreal, an improbable intersection of worlds, a universe away from his usual Friday night routine of quiet meals at home. A soft evening sun, a painter of golden hues, cast its gentle light over the towering high-rises, turning their glass facades into shimmering canvases as they pulled up near the valet entrance. The polished cars, gleaming under the fading light, were a stark contrast to his modest sedan. A man in a sharp suit, whose job was solely to open doors for the extraordinarily wealthy, moved with practiced efficiency to their vehicle. Lucas stepped out, a paper-wrapped bouquet in hand. Wildflowers from the farmer's market, a riot of simple, unpretentious beauty, a detail his late wife, Clara, would have insisted on. Always bring beauty when you're stepping into someone's world, she used to say, her gentle wisdom echoing in his mind, a quiet guiding principle. Becca jumped out with quiet excitement, her gaze sweeping over the opulent entrance, taking in every gilded detail. "Do you think she'll talk again?" she whispered, her voice filled with a child's hopeful innocence, a pure, unwavering belief in possibility. "I don't know," Lucas said, his voice thoughtful, his own hopes carefully guarded. "But I think she'll listen." They were greeted at the grand penthouse door by Mayline herself, a vision starkly different from the formidable CEO Lucas had first encountered in her steel and glass office. She was dressed not in a power suit, but in a simple navy blouse and comfortable slacks, barefoot again, her blonde hair loosely tied back in a casual ponytail, a few soft strands escaping to frame her face. There was a rare, almost vulnerable domesticity radiating from her, an unpolished genuineness that was new. "You brought flowers?" she asked, a genuine surprise in her voice, her eyes softening as she took in the vibrant, unpretentious bouquet. "For the room," Lucas replied, offering them to her, a gesture of quiet grace. "It needs something alive." She blinked, a slow, deliberate movement, a dawning realization in her gaze. "I suppose that includes us tonight," she murmured, a hint of self-awareness, a fragile acceptance of their shared humanity in this extraordinary setting. The dining room, once a cold, expansive tableau of marble and crystal, a space that had likely hosted countless high-stakes business negotiations, had been subtly rearranged. The long, executive-style table, a symbol of power and hierarchy, had been replaced by a round table, far less imposing, creating an atmosphere of intimacy rather than confrontation. The harsh overhead lighting had been dimmed, casting a softer, more inviting glow, warming the cool tones of the room. A single candle flickered gently in the center of the table, its warm light dancing on the polished surfaces, reflecting in the crystal glasses, creating a focal point of quiet serenity. Eva sat at the table already, her small hands folded patiently in front of her, a blue crayon tucked between two fingers like a comfort object, a silent testament to the new language she was learning, the color of safety she now carried with her. Becca, with her usual intuitive grace, slid into the seat beside her and whispered, a gentle conspiratorial tone in her voice, "I brought something." From her tote, she pulled out a small, hand-drawn menu, charmingly illustrated with cartoon foods, smiling grapes, dancing toast, a macaroni sun. Eva's lips curved upward, a faint, almost imperceptible smile, a profound shift from her usual blank expression. Mayline watched the exchange, her breath held, a silent witness to a quiet miracle unfolding before her very eyes, a magic trick played out in crayon and whispered words. Dinner was served. Simple, soft foods, chosen with careful consideration for Eva's sensitivities, a deliberate act of nurturing. There were no rich sauces, no strong, overwhelming smells. Everything was gentle and reassuring. Eva's plate matched Becca's exactly, a small, yet profoundly significant detail that spoke volumes about Mayline's newfound attentiveness, her burgeoning ability to see and meet her daughter's unique needs. And Lucas noticed something else, too, a silent revolution. The absence of Mayline's phone. It wasn't on the table, not in her hand, not even glimpsed in a pocket. Tonight, she was truly present. "Tonight," she said, noticing his glance, a faint, almost shy smile touching her lips, a confession of her own effort. I'm only reachable in one language. Lucas chuckled, a genuine, warm sound that filled the comfortable silence. That's progress, he acknowledged, a quiet admiration in his voice. For the first few minutes, a comfortable silence ruled the table. It wasn't an awkward silence, but an expectant one, filled with a gentle hum of connection, the quiet enjoyment of food. Then Becca, always the one to break the ice with gentle, childlike wisdom, her voice soft and inviting, asked, "Eva, do you want to color after dinner?" Eva looked at her plate, her gaze fixed on the perfectly arranged food, a moment of internal consideration. Becca waited, patiently, without pressure, without demanding a response, respecting Eva's unique rhythm. Eva reached out, her small hand moving deliberately, picked up a soft piece of baked sweet potato, and placed it in her mouth. Lucas froze, his heart stilled in his chest, witnessing a small, profound victory, a tiny act of trust. Becca smiled as if it were the most normal thing in the world, her innocence highlighting the true significance of the moment. "Yay, twinsies!" she exclaimed softly, her joy infectious. Mayline exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, a profound release of tension, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for her glass of water, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and dawning understanding. Lucas leaned closer, his voice a quiet whisper meant only for her, a shared intimacy. "She didn't eat this morning, did she?" Mayline shook her head, her gaze fixed on Eva, tears beginning to well in her eyes. "Or yesterday?" "She's choosing this," Lucas said, his voice thick with emotion, a quiet triumph in his tone. "This moment, this company, this stillness." Mayline's eyes welled, her careful composure finally breaking, raw, undeniable emotion pouring out. "Why do I feel like I've missed every step that mattered?" Lucas didn't answer directly. "Instead," he said, his voice gentle but firm, a guiding hand, "let her lead." The girls finished their food slowly, each bite a deliberate, unhurried act, a shared rhythm of nourishment. Eva hummed once, a single, clear note, almost like punctuation to the moment, a tiny burst of sound in the quiet space, a subtle expression of contentment. Then, a profound gesture. She reached over and gently, tentatively, touched Becca's hand. Mayline gasped, not loudly, but sharply enough for Eva to flinch, her small hand withdrawing instinctively, a momentary regression. Lucas held up a palm, a silent reassurance, his gaze steady, calming. "It's okay, it's okay." Eva looked at her mother, then at Lucas, her blue eyes wide, a flicker of uncertainty. Then she said, clear, quiet, and profoundly beautiful, her voice a soft, fragile melody, "Blue." Mayline dropped her fork, to clatter a stark intrusion in the quiet room, a small sound that underscored the monumental impact of Eva's word. Lucas swallowed hard, a lump forming in his throat, his own emotions surging. "She remembers the bubbles," he said, his voice thick with wonder. Eva nodded once, a small, deliberate movement, confirming her memory, her trust. Becca whispered, her eyes wide with understanding, a profound insight for a child. "She speaks in colors. That's how she feels safe." Mayline's lips parted, her voice breaking, a wave of poignant memory washing over her. "I used to paint before I started the company. Watercolors. My studio was painted blue." Eva didn't forget, Lucas said gently. "You did." Later, the girls played quietly in the adjoining room, the soft sounds of their quiet play a gentle counterpoint to the city's distant hum, a harmonious blend of innocence and urban life. Eva gently stacked blocks, her movements precise and deliberate, creating small, symmetrical towers. Becca narrated imaginary stories about bubble kingdoms and cloud princesses, her voice a soft, continuous stream of invention, filling the air with magic. Lucas stood by the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, methodically washing the dinner dishes, finding a quiet rhythm in the mundane task, a grounding presence. Mayline joined him, holding a towel, drying silently, her movements unhurried, thoughtful, her usual corporate urgency replaced by a quiet contemplation. "I thought I had to buy her future," she said finally, her voice low, a raw confession, a painful admission of past mistakes. "The right school, the top doctors. I built her a fortress so nothing could touch her. But maybe I also built the walls too high for me to reach in." Lucas passed her a wet plate, its surface gleaming under the kitchen lights. "It's not too late." She dried it slowly, carefully, her gaze distant, lost in reflection. "She called you Blue." He nodded. "That's a good thing. Blue is her comfort." Mayline glanced at him, a flicker of curiosity, a deeper question in her eyes. "What color am I to her, do you think?" Lucas paused, considering, choosing his words carefully. Red still is. She let out a trembling laugh, a fragile, almost broken sound, tinged with self-deprecation. Red burns. It also warms, he said, his voice gentle but firm, a profound truth. Sometimes the same fire that scorches is the one that saves. She stared at him, truly seeing him, not just as a janitor, but as a man of profound wisdom and quiet strength. Then, quietly, almost vulnerably, she asked, "Why are you still single, Lucas?" He raised an eyebrow, a faint, amused smile touching his lips. "You really want to ask me that while I'm wrist deep in your sink?" She smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes, a rare, unguarded moment. "You could have said yes to me hiring you weeks ago. I didn't want a job." "Then what did you want?" He rinsed the last plate, setting it on the drying rack, then turned to her, his expression serious, open. "To be useful again, to someone who actually needed me." She held his gaze for a long time, searching his eyes, absorbing his truth, then nodded almost reverently. "You are," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion, a profound acknowledgement. "You're saving us in ways money never could." Lucas dried his hands, then turned to her, his expression serious, his gaze unwavering. "I'm not saving you. I'm just showing you the door. And if you don't know how to walk through it, then sit on the floor with your daughter. Let her lead." As he gathered Becca's things to leave, the small collection of books and crayons, Eva's voice, clear and strong, carried from the adjoining room, saying something no one expected. "Dinner again." Lucas stopped mid-step, his heart doing a small flutter. Mayline's hand went to her mouth, a silent gasp of surprise and joy, her eyes wide. "Of course," Becca said, her voice bright and immediate, already planning. "Next Friday." Eva smiled, a shy, radiant smile that lit up her entire face, a profound expression of contentment. And the room, for the first time in years, truly felt like a home. A shared home, built on trust, stillness, and the promise of shared meals. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, and embossed with the gold seal of the Superior Court of New York. It sat like a warning flare on Mayline's marble kitchen island, untouched, unopened, but radiating a palpable dread that permeated the serene penthouse. Its very presence was an intrusion, a harsh symbol of the world Mayline had thought she could shield Eva from. Lucas glanced at it as he rinsed dishes, the mundane task of domesticity a stark, almost absurd contrast to the legal storm brewing just beyond the polished surfaces. "That the thing?" he asked, his voice low, filled with an empathetic understanding. Mayline nodded once, her face pale, drawn, her usual composure fractured by an underlying tremor. "Eva's father is filing for emergency custody." Lucas dried his hands slowly, deliberately, his movements controlled, his mind already assessing the implications. "After vanishing for 4 years," he mused, the injustice of it a bitter taste. Mayline exhaled, her voice trembling, barely a whisper. "He says I've become unstable, that I'm exposing her to questionable figures and non-professionals." She paused, her gaze meeting Lucas's, a raw vulnerability in her eyes that made his heart ache. "He means you." Lucas leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, his expression hardening, a quiet fire igniting in his eyes. "That man wouldn't know Eva if she drew him a name tag," he stated, the sarcasm edged with a fierce protectiveness. Mayline exhaled sharply, a sound teetering on the edge of laughter or utter collapse, her emotions stretched thin. "He's wealthy, connected. His attorney used to clerk for the judge. He knows how to manipulate the system." Lucas walked around the island, his presence a steady anchor in her escalating anxiety. He leaned in gently, his voice low and reassuring. "Do you want me to back off?" Her answer was immediate, firm, a surprising surge of resolve. "No." "Then we fight," Lucas said, his voice imbued with a quiet conviction, a promise. She looked up at him, a flicker of fear still in her eyes, but also a nascent spark of hope. "I don't know how." "You don't need to," he said, his voice full of quiet strength. "You just need to stand beside her, and I'll stand beside both of you." The courtroom, a solemn chamber draped in dark wood and hushed tones, smelled like aged leather, cold coffee, and a pervasive, almost suffocating fear. It was a stark, unforgiving environment, designed for judgment. Eva sat quietly in the gallery beside Becca, clutching a sketch pad to her chest like a shield, her small figure almost lost in the vastness of the imposing room. She wore blue, her comfort color, a silent anchor in the overwhelming newness. Becca held her hand, a small, unwavering lifeline, her innocent presence a stark contrast to the cutthroat legal battle unfolding. Maline stood before the judge, clad in a simple navy suit, not designer, but grounded, solid, devoid of any pretense. No flashy jewelry, no power heels, just a woman stripped of her corporate armor, holding on to a truth she had only recently discovered. Across from her, Spencer Ward, Eva's father, sat with a smirk carved into his face, an arrogant confidence radiating from him. His legal team, a formidable array of sharp suits and sharper minds, looked like they'd rehearsed this war countless times, perfectly poised for victory. "Your Honor," Spencer's attorney began, his voice smooth, condescending, dripping with disdain. "Miss Ward's emotional state has deteriorated. We have photographic evidence of her involving a janitorial worker, one with no clinical qualifications, in repeated, unsupervised interactions with a vulnerable child." Lucas didn't flinch, his gaze fixed on the attorney, a quiet fire burning in his eyes. The attorney continued, his voice laced with thinly veiled contempt. "She's ignored professional medical advice in favor of bubble games and crayon therapy, demonstrating a clear disregard for Eva's well-being." Chuckles, faint and dismissive, echoed from parts of the gallery, fueled by the sensationalist narrative. Maline stood taller, her resolve hardening, a quiet strength emanating from her. "And what has Mr. Ward contributed in the past 4 years?" the judge asked, his voice dry, cutting through the lawyer's rhetoric with surgical precision. "Financial support and space to grow," Lucas muttered under his breath, a sarcastic counterpoint to Spencer's carefully constructed narrative of benevolent fatherhood. "Space to disappear," he thought bitterly. Maline's attorney, a quiet, dignified woman, rose. "Your Honor, we don't deny Miss Ward's methods have changed, but so have the results. Eva has spoken. She eats, she draws, she connects, all of which hadn't happened in over 2 years, despite the best and most expensive professional care. These are not signs of deterioration, but of profound progress." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom. "And the man she's connected with, Lucas Hale, is here today. He'd like to speak." The judge nodded, a rare hint of curiosity in his eyes. "Let him." Lucas stood, walked slowly to the witness stand. Every camera clicked, a cacophony of flashes momentarily blinding. Every whisper stopped, the courtroom holding its breath, sensing a shift in the sterile atmosphere. He sat, looked at the judge directly, his gaze steady and unwavering, imbued with a quiet authority that silenced the room completely. "I was a special education teacher for 11 years, he began, his voice calm, clear, resonating with a profound honesty. "I left the classroom after my wife died. I couldn't face the echo of my own loss in every child who needed more than I could give. The pain was too raw, too constant." He glanced at Eva, a soft, loving look in his eyes, a silent testament to their unique bond. "She brought me back. Her silence, her struggle, it mirrored a part of my own. She needed me to listen, not to fix." The courtroom held its breath, captivated by his raw honesty, his vulnerability. "Eva doesn't need more labels. She needs fewer walls. I didn't treat her. I listened. I knelt. I matched her silence with my stillness. And in return, she trusted me." He turned, his gaze unwavering, to Spencer Ward, a silent, powerful challenge. "When's the last time she looked you in the eye, Mr. Ward?" Spencer fumbled with his cufflinks, his confident smirk faltering, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Lucas continued, his voice gaining strength, imbued with a quiet, righteous anger. "You think the suit makes you credible, but Eva doesn't care about titles. She cares about tone, about rhythm, about who enters her world without breaking it, without demanding she conform to an expectation she can't meet." He looked back at the judge, his gaze earnest, profound. "I'm not here to parent her. I'm here because she taught me something every specialist forgot. Sometimes the most therapeutic thing you can do is stay. To simply be present, without agenda, without judgment, without the need for a specific outcome." Silence. A profound, almost sacred silence descended upon the courtroom. Then the judge nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, his expression thoughtful. "Thank you, Mr. Hale." Lucas returned to his seat, a quiet ripple of respect following him. Then, softly, unexpectedly, Becca stood up. Her small figure, clad in a simple dress, radiated a surprising determination. She walked to the judge's bench, her tiny steps echoing in the hushed chamber. Whispers erupted, a ripple of unease and curiosity, but the judge raised a hand, silencing the room once more. Becca looked up at him, her wide, innocent eyes filled with a quiet resolve, a fierce protectiveness. Can I say something? The judge bent down, his expression gentle, intrigued. You may. She held up Eva's drawing, the one from the penthouse, a simple, poignant piece of art. It depicted a trio of stick figures, arms linked, under a sky full of crayon stars. This is Eva's family, she said, her voice clear, unwavering, imbued with a child's undeniable truth. That's me. That's my dad. That's her. She pointed to each figure in turn, identifying them with unwavering certainty. She doesn't talk a lot, but she says we're blue. That means safe. Meline wiped a tear, her hand trembling, her heart swelling with an overwhelming mix of pride and vulnerability. As if on cue, a moment of profound connection, Eva reached out and touched Becca's hand, publicly, visibly, a gesture louder and more eloquent than any words could be. The judge leaned back, silent for a long moment, his gaze sweeping over the courtroom, lingering on the two children, then on Meline and Lucas. He absorbed the unspoken narrative, the genuine connection that had been so powerfully demonstrated. Then he spoke, his voice clear, firm, and resonant. Effective immediately, Eva remains in the custody of her mother, Meline Ward. The court finds clear evidence of significant progress in Eva's well-being under Miss Ward's new approach to care, and that the child demonstrates a strong, healthy attachment to her current environment and the individuals within it. Any further action from Mr. Ward will require extensive psychological review and family therapy, in which Mr. Hale is welcome to participate with full transparency as a recognized figure in Eva's supportive network. Gasps, camera flashes, a new kind of silence, one of disbelief from Spencer's side, and profound relief from Meline's. Then Eva turned to Meline and whispered, her voice soft but clear, "Stay blue." Meline nodded, eyes shining with unshed tears, her voice thick with emotion. Always. Outside the courthouse, the victory was met with a storm of reporters, cameras flashing like lightning in a summer storm, their relentless pursuit a stark reminder of the public eye. Lucas instinctively shielded the girls with his body, his protective instinct paramount. Meline, without thinking, grabbed his hand, clutching it tightly, a silent acknowledgement of their shared fight, their shared victory. A journalist, shouting over the din, called out, "Miss Ward, are you in a relationship with the janitor?" Meline paused, her gaze meeting Lucas's, a long, deep look that spoke volumes. Then she turned back to the clamoring crowd, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity, a steel tempered by vulnerability. "I'm in a relationship with the truth," she answered, her voice steady and powerful, "and he's been living it far longer than I have." Lucas smiled quietly, a warmth spreading through him, a profound sense of rightness. Eva, nestled between them, her small hand held firmly by Becca, didn't let go. No walls, no titles, just color, just connection, just family, building itself one quiet, courageous moment at a time. The battle was won, not by legal jargon, but by the undeniable power of presence and love. The blueprints, a complex tapestry of lines, dimensions, and carefully annotated details, were still warm from the printer when Meline slid them across the vast, gleaming surface of her office conference table. Lucas stared at them, his brows furrowing in a mixture of surprise, contemplation, and a hint of disbelief. The sheer scale and ambition of the plans were breathtaking. "You're serious about this?" he asked, his voice low, a quiet question that underscored the monumental shift in her priorities. She looked up, her gaze steady, resolute. There was no hint of her old corporate ice, no cold calculation in her eyes, only fire, purpose, and something deeper, a profound conviction, a soulful commitment that had been forged in the crucible of her recent struggle. "You once said Eva didn't need perfection, just presence," she began, her voice gaining a quiet, passionate intensity. "So, I want to build a place that reflects that. A space where kids like her don't have to prove they belong, where they can simply be." He studied the intricate plans, his eyes tracing the careful details, the innovative concepts that spoke directly to his own forgotten dreams. Open concept rooms, designed for flow and gentle interaction, avoiding the claustrophobic feeling of traditional therapy spaces. No assigned seating, encouraging freedom of movement, choice, and a sense of agency for the children. Textures mapped by color, not by rigid, often overwhelming, categories, creating a sensory landscape that was inviting rather than intimidating. Soundproof corners for retreat, offering sanctuary from sensory overload, a safe haven within a larger, stimulating environment. Soft, natural lighting, carefully calibrated to avoid the harsh fluorescent buzz so often found in institutional settings, replaced by warmth and calm. At the very top of the plans, bold and unshakable, was the proposed name, The Ward Hale room for inclusion, not correction. Lucas leaned back in his chair, silent for a long moment, the weight of the vision settling upon him, resonating deep within his own past. I used to sketch rooms like this in notebooks, he said, a nostalgic wistfulness in his voice, a hint of a dream long deferred. When I was teaching special education, before life got louder, before everything changed. He paused, a flicker of that old pain crossing his features. You still believe in it? She asked, her voice soft, almost a plea for affirmation, for a shared hope. I never stopped, he replied, meeting her gaze, his eyes holding a quiet intensity. I just stopped thinking anyone else did. The sheer improbability of a billionaire CEO sharing his long-lost vision with him was a powerful testament to the profound shift that had occurred between them. Mayline folded her hands on the table, her expression earnest, her gaze unwavering. Help me build it. He hesitated, the enormity of the request, the weight of the trust she was placing in him, sinking in. You're asking a janitor to design a therapy center, he said slowly, carefully, articulating the apparent absurdity of it all, yet sensing the deeper truth. I'm asking a father who listens before he speaks, she replied, her voice firm, unwavering, her conviction absolute. That's rarer than any degree on my payroll, more valuable than any consultant I've ever hired. He looked at her, something tender surfacing beneath his caution, a burgeoning sense of connection that transcended their different worlds, their vastly different social strata. This room, he whispered, tapping the plans, his finger tracing a projected wall, won't just change children. It'll change their parents, their teachers. It might change people who didn't know they were broken. The realization was profound, almost overwhelming. That's the point, Mayline said, her eyes shining with a quiet intensity, a fierce dedication. I don't want to just help Eva. I want to redeem the silence I once filled with noise, to correct the mistakes I made by trying to control rather than connect. Lucas nodded, a slow, deliberate movement, then smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from him, a sense of shared purpose. Then we build it, he said, the words a quiet promise, a powerful commitment, a bridge built between their disparate lives. Construction began in a quiet old building, tucked away behind the gleaming towers of the city. It had once been a forgotten storage space, dusty and derelict, a repository of forgotten things. Now it was filled with the sounds of something new being born, the rhythmic thud of hammers, the careful whir of saws, the gentle murmur of conversations, the scraping of paintbrushes. Becca, with her boundless energy and innocent enthusiasm, became an indispensable helper. She helped Lucas paint stars on the walls, her small hand guided by his, adding whimsical, imaginative touches to the emerging space. Eva, surprisingly, wanted to help too. She painted blue, always blue, her comfort color, a steady presence amidst the evolving colors of the room. But one day, a small, tentative streak of yellow appeared in the corner of her blue canvas. What's that? Lucas asked, his voice soft, curious, carefully observant. Eva paused, then whispered, her voice barely audible. Hope. He choked back emotion, a lump forming in his throat, witnessing another profound step in her journey. Yeah, he said, his voice thick with unexpressed feeling. Exactly that. Mayline, true to her word, started spending evenings on site, her usual corporate attire replaced by sneakers and comfortable jeans, her tailored coats exchanged for practical work shirts. She carried color swatches and fabric samples instead of spreadsheets and quarterly reports, her focus shifting from global markets to the tactile feel of fabric, the subtle nuances of paint, the sensory experience of the space. One afternoon, she sat with Lucas on a stack of unused carpet rolls, their faces smudged with paint and dust, sweat on her brow, her hair in delightful disarray. I don't recognize myself anymore, she said, her voice quiet, almost bewildered, a confession of her profound transformation. That's not a bad thing, Lucas replied, his gaze gentle, understanding. She looked at him, a vulnerability in her eyes she no longer tried to hide. I used to think love was performance. Straight A's, perfect posture, clean presentations, flawless outcomes. She paused, a wry smile touching her lips. Then this little girl came into my life and said nothing, but taught me everything. She tore down every assumption I had about what matters. Lucas nodded slowly, understanding the seismic shift she was describing. Children don't care who you are, only how you show up. She hesitated, a flicker of doubt in her eyes, a resurgence of her old fears. Do you think this center will be enough? The question hung heavy in the air, weighted with her desire for redemption, for meaning. He turned to her gently, his gaze reassuring, steadfast. Nothing will ever be enough. That's the secret. The pursuit of perfection is an endless, exhausting road. But if you pour love into it without needing applause, without needing it to be a specific, measurable success, it becomes more than a building. It becomes belonging. It becomes a place where hearts can heal. She smiled, a soft, genuine smile, but it faded into something else, something deeper, more fearful. I'm scared, Lucas. If this fails, if I fail again, after all of this, what happens to her? To Eva? Lucas didn't hesitate, his answer immediate and unwavering, a testament to his steadfast commitment. Then we fall with her, he said, his voice steady, resolute, accepting the risk. But we fall together. That's the difference. We're not alone anymore. Opening day arrived under golden skies, the sun casting a warm, welcoming glow on the newly renovated building, now a beacon of vibrant colors and soft light. Balloons floated above the door, a festive splash of color that drew the eye. The sign gleamed under the sunlight, the Ward Hale Room. Below it, a small plaque, simple and profound, encapsulating its core philosophy. No titles, no tests, just time, trust, and tenderness. Families arrived, hesitant at first, parents holding tight to their children's hands, teachers and therapists watching carefully, their expressions a mix of curiosity and cautious skepticism. But inside, everything felt different. The air was soft, inviting. No one asked what diagnosis a child had. They asked what music they liked, what color calmed them, what made them laugh. The focus was on connection, on individual preference, not on classification or deficit. Lucas moved through the rooms like he'd always lived there, a quiet, guiding presence, his years as a special education teacher coming alive again. He showed a father, whose face was etched with worry, how to use soft, reassuring hands with his overstimulated son, demonstrating patience and understanding. He knelt beside a girl who didn't speak, matching her breathing rhythm with his own, a silent dance of empathy, until, miraculously, she smiled, a small, shy bloom of trust. Becca, a natural leader with a generous heart, led a group of children in drawing intricate bubble patterns on the windows, their laughter echoing softly, a joyful symphony. Eva sat quietly on a bean bag, humming to herself, her blue crayon clutched in her hand. But she wasn't alone. 2 other children sat beside her, mimicking her gentle tune, a shared rhythm of peace, an unspoken communion. Mayline stood in the corner, her gaze sweeping over the bustling, joyful scene, utterly stunned. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the vibrant colors of the room. I dreamed this room, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, a profound realization. But I didn't believe it could breathe. I didn't believe it could be real. Lucas stood beside her, his hand gently on her arm, a steady, comforting presence. It's breathing because you stopped controlling the air, he said, his voice soft, profound. She turned to him, her gaze intense, searching. You know what I feared most? What? He asked softly, ready to listen. That Eva would never call me Mom. He was quiet, allowing her words to hang in the air, acknowledging the depth of that fear. Then she added, her voice thick with a newfound understanding, a profound sense of peace. But lately, I'm starting to hope she never has to, because love like this, it speaks without labels. It speaks in colors, in whispers, in shared stillness. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, a profound understanding passing between them, a silent recognition of her transformation. You've become the room, he said softly, unlabeled, unafraid, full of breathing, gentle life. She laughed quietly, a genuine, unburdened sound, tinged with wonder. You always say things that sound like they belong in a poem. He looked at her, his eyes reflecting the soft glow of the room, the vibrant energy of the children. Maybe because life finally feels like one. That night, as they locked up, the last children and families having departed, Mayline lingered at the doorway, bathed in the soft glow of the new sign, a beacon of hope in the gathering dusk. The Ward Hale Room. It was more than a name. It was a legacy. Lucas turned the key in the lock, the click of final punctuation to the day, then looked at her. Thank you, she said, her voice sincere, imbued with a deep gratitude. For what? He asked, a gentle curiosity in his eyes. For helping me build a place where I could finally meet my own daughter, and in doing so, meet myself. Lucas didn't speak. He just stepped beside her, their hands brushing slightly, but deliberately, a subtle, unspoken connection, as they looked at what they'd built. Not a monument, but a movement. Not a center, but a beginning. And in the quiet promise of that beginning, A new kind of family was taking root. The old community garden had been abandoned for years, a forgotten patch of green swallowed by the encroaching urban sprawl. Its wooden benches were cracked and weathered, grayed by countless seasons of neglect. The soil, once rich and fertile, had hardened into an unforgiving crust, tangled with stubborn weeds and the skeletal remains of forgotten intentions. Its once vibrant vines, now brown and brittle, clung desperately to crumbling trellises, silent testaments to a past vibrancy. But today it was alive again, humming with a new kind of energy, a quiet resurrection. The air, usually heavy with the scent of exhaust fumes, now carried the faint, sweet promise of damp earth and budding life. Lucas knelt in the softened earth, his hands dirty with rich, dark soil, the familiar grit a comforting presence. Sweat trickled down his neck, tracing paths through the dust, as he guided Eva's small fingers around a delicate seedling. Its roots, white and fragile, were carefully nestled into the prepared bed, a tiny promise of future growth. His voice was a low, patient murmur, explaining the miracle of life emerging from the soil. Becca was nearby, her own small hands gently pressing soil around another sprout, her brow furrowed in concentration, her tongue peeking out from the corner of her mouth as she focused. And Maylin Ward was there too, a figure utterly transformed from her usual corporate persona. She wore comfortable jeans and sneakers, her blonde hair tied back in a messy ponytail, a few stray wisps escaping to frame her face. She held a trowel like she'd wielded it her whole life, her movements initially tentative, then gaining a surprising grace and confidence as she worked the earth. This place was her dream, Lucas said quietly, his voice tinged with a nostalgic warmth, his gaze sweeping over the burgeoning greenery, the small, determined efforts taking root. Maylin looked over, her expression soft, curious, sensing the deeper meaning behind his words. "Your wife?" she asked gently, her voice devoid of its usual sharpness, instead imbued with a rare empathy. He nodded, a gentle smile on his face, a distant look in his eyes that spoke of cherished memories. "Clara. She used to say that kids with different needs grow best in wild places, places that didn't ask them to shrink, to conform to a rigid, unnatural order, places that celebrated their unique, untamed beauty." Maylin looked around, taking in the untamed beauty of the nascent garden, the blossoming life around them, understanding the profound wisdom in Clara's words. "You're bringing it back," she observed, a quiet reverence in her voice. "I think," Lucas replied, brushing a stray leaf from his hair, his gaze sweeping over the tranquil scene, "it's bringing us back. Bringing us back to something more fundamental, more real." Eva crouched beside a patch of bluebells, their delicate cups swaying gently in the soft breeze, humming softly to herself, a melodic counterpoint to the rustling leaves and the distant urban sounds. "She's been choosing blue more often," Maylin noted, a quiet observation that spoke volumes about Eva's internal world, her growing sense of security. Lucas smiled. "It's the color she paints safety with. It's her anchor in the world." Then a subtle shift occurred, a profound moment that seemed to alter the very light of the day. Eva stood, walked to the mural wall they'd just finished repainting a fresh, blank canvas awaiting expression, picked up a brush, and without a word, began painting a streak of vibrant yellow. Becca gasped, her eyes wide with surprise and wonder. "That's not her usual," she exclaimed, her voice a mix of shock and delight. Eva paused, glanced back at Maylin, a fleeting, almost imperceptible glance, a silent check for approval, then continued painting, the yellow rays radiating from a blue sun, stretching across the wall like a dawn she was no longer afraid of, a burst of uninhibited joy. "She's adding light," Lucas whispered, his voice thick with emotion, his heart swelling with pride. Maylin's throat tightened, a profound understanding dawning within her, a lump of emotion rising. "It's the first time she's chosen a warm color," she managed to whisper, her voice trembling. Eva turned around, her blue eyes shining with a newfound confidence. She walked to her mother, her movements deliberate and confident, held out the paintbrush and spoke, her voice clear and gentle, a soft melody that seemed to make the very air vibrate. "You do one." Maylin's hand trembled as she took the brush, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and profound joy, the weight of the moment almost overwhelming. "Where?" she asked gently, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to break the delicate spell. Eva pointed, her small finger direct and unwavering. "Next to mine." Maylin dipped the brush in a soft coral hue, a color she'd never associated with herself, a color that felt warm and inviting, and with a deep breath, made a single stroke beside her daughter's yellow. Then, after a pause, a breath held, she added another, A small, confident flourish. Eva smiled, wide, real, and radiant. A light that shone from within, reflecting the dawning sun she had just painted. Lucas stepped back, watching them side by side, a profound sense of rightness settling over him, a feeling of completion. "You've crossed over," he said softly, almost to himself, a quiet acknowledgement of Meline's profound transformation. Meline turned, a question in her eyes. "Crossed where?" "From trying to reach a world to letting her build one with you in it." She looked at him, a silent understanding passing between them, but he just smiled and nodded toward Eva. "She's the architect now." Later, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, painting the garden in a soft, ethereal amber light, the four of them sat on a worn bench. Its cracked wood and peeling paint were a testament to time, to neglect, but now it felt perfectly imperfect, a symbol of resilience and quiet joy. Becca leaned into Lucas, her small head resting on his shoulder, utterly content. "Do you think this place will grow?" she asked, her voice soft with childlike wonder. "I think," he said, brushing a stray leaf from her hair, his gaze sweeping over the tranquil garden, now bathed in the gentle glow of twilight. "It already is. It's growing in ways we can only just begin to understand." Meline watched Eva collect small wildflowers, her delicate fingers meticulously lining them up in color order, a familiar ritual that now felt infused with a new meaning. "She used to do that with cereal," she said quietly, a distant memory surfacing, tinged with regret. "Sort it by shape, then by color, then cry if I moved one." "She wasn't being difficult," Lucas said, his voice gentle, understanding. "She was trying to bring order to a world that never asked her how it felt to live in it. A world that demanded she conform without understanding her inherent needs." Meline nodded slowly, a deep understanding washing over her, a painful but necessary realization of her past blindness. "I never asked either." "But you're listening now," Lucas replied, his voice soft, acknowledging her growth, her effort. She looked at him, her gaze direct, vulnerable, stripped of all corporate pretense. "Lucas, when this all started, I saw you as a temporary fix, a stopgap, a means to an end." He raised an eyebrow, a faint, amused smile touching his lips. "Thanks." She chuckled, a soft, genuine sound that was filled with self-awareness. "I mean it. I thought you were a phase, a moment, a mistake I was too tired to correct, an unconventional solution I'd quickly replace." She looked towards Eva, her eyes filled with a profound love, a dawning clarity. "And now I think you were the first right thing I didn't control, the first right thing I simply allowed to be." Lucas turned toward her fully, his expression serious, open, absorbing her words, sensing the profound confession. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked softly, almost breathlessly. "Because something's changed," she said, her voice soft but resolute, her gaze unwavering. "Not just with Eva, with me." He didn't speak, just listened, and she continued, her words flowing freely, a torrent of long-suppressed emotion and newfound understanding. "Before you, I filled silence with noise. Meetings, plans, metrics, deadlines. I thought if I controlled enough, if I built enough, if I achieved enough, I could outmaneuver the loneliness, the emptiness, the fear of losing Eva. And now, I don't want to maneuver anything anymore. I just want to be." Lucas looked at her for a long moment, the garden air holding them in a gentle embrace, like a pause in a symphony, a moment suspended in time. He spoke softly, his voice imbued with a profound wisdom. "There's a difference between building walls and planting roots." Meline nodded, tears forming in her eyes, tears of understanding, of release. "I think I'm ready to root." Eva walked over, her small hands holding a piece of paper, a new drawing. 3 figures holding hands. One had curly hair. One wore glasses. One had a ponytail and a smile so big it nearly reached the paper's edge, radiating pure joy. Above them was a sky filled with blue and yellow stars, a celestial tapestry of safety and hope. Lucas read the small caption scribbled at the bottom in shaky handwriting, painstakingly formed, each letter a profound effort. "Home is when we all fit in the same picture." Meline pressed the drawing to her chest, her heart overflowing, tears finally streaming down her face. But these were tears of pure, unadulterated joy. Lucas wrapped an arm gently around her, a comforting, steady presence. Becca leaned her head on Meline's shoulder, a gesture of familial closeness. And Eva, quiet Eva, whispered something so soft it felt like music, a dream-given voice. "Let's stay here forever." And in that moment, as the last light of day faded from the garden, they all silently agreed. They already were. Rooted, connected, home. The photograph was blurry, grainy, almost deliberately unflattering, but it was undeniably damning. It captured Mayline Ward, CEO of Wardcore Biotech, barefoot in a community garden, her usually immaculate blonde hair in a messy ponytail, her face alight with an uninhibited, genuine laugh. Next to her, Lucas Hale, the janitor, smiling broadly, shirt sleeves rolled up, his hand gently brushing hers in a moment of unguarded connection. A child's painting hung on a makeshift easel behind them, messy and bright, a riot of colors, adding to the informal, almost rebellious tableau. And in bold, accusatory letters across the top of the tabloid, a headline screamed its judgment. From boardroom to bubbles, is Wardcore's CEO falling for her janitor? The article, dripping with speculation, thinly veiled judgment, and a sneering contempt for their unconventional relationship, landed like a bomb in the pristine world of corporate finance. The article dropped at 7:42 and by 8:03, fueled by outrage and salacious gossip, it had gone viral, a wildfire of digital condemnation spreading across social media and financial news outlets. By 8:15, Lucas's phone buzzed with a message he didn't expect, a lifeline from Mayline herself. "Don't speak to the press. I'll handle this." But the strained, pale look on her face when she arrived at the Ward Hale room an hour later, her phone still glued to her palm, buzzing incessantly with calls and messages, told a different story. Her lips were pressed into a tight, thin line, her usual formidable composure fractured by visible stress. "They're calling for my resignation," she said, her voice strained, barely above a whisper, as if merely speaking the words could make them more real. Lucas exhaled slowly, the weight of the news settling heavily in his chest, a cold dread seeping in. "The board." "Half of them," she confirmed, her voice cracking, a visible tremor in her composure. "And Greg," her former PR strategist, now a formidable opponent. "He says I've compromised our brand, that I've—" She broke off, swallowing the words, unable to articulate the full force of the accusations, the unspoken implications of blurred lines and unprofessional conduct hanging heavy in the air between them. Lucas nodded slowly, his gaze steady, unwavering, filled with a quiet intensity. "And what do you think?" he asked, gently pushing her to articulate her own truth amidst the external noise. She looked at him, her eyes rimmed red with unshed tears, exhaustion etched into her features, stripping away the last vestiges of her corporate armor. "I think I'm tired of being a brand," she confessed, her voice a raw, vulnerable whisper, a profound admission of burnout and disillusionment. They stood in the hallway of the Ward Hale room, surrounded by children's drawings taped to the walls. Scribbles, bursts of joyful color, images of bubble kingdoms and happy families, none of it corporate, all of it real, vibrant, alive. It was a stark contrast to the cold, calculating world Mayline had just described. "I can resign," she whispered, her voice fragile, a desperate attempt to regain some semblance of control, to minimize the damage. "Gracefully. We protect the foundation. We protect you." Lucas's expression darkened, a quiet fire igniting in his eyes, a fierce protectiveness that transcended their different social strata. "No," he said firmly, his voice cutting through her despair. "You've seen the backlash. I've seen a girl who paints yellow suns now. Mayline, we don't sacrifice that." He looked away, his gaze sweeping over the vibrant artwork, remembering Eva's fragile yellow streak of hope. Lucas stepped closer, his voice low, urgent, resonating with a profound truth. "You want to walk away to protect this place. I get it. But don't lie to yourself and call it noble. This center wasn't built on image. It was built on presence, on staying, on showing up even when it's hard." She blinked hard, her jaw trembling, the undeniable truth of his words sinking in, shattering her carefully constructed rationale. "Then what do I do?" she asked, a raw plea for guidance. "You stay," he said, his voice unwavering, a powerful anchor in her storm. "Even when it's loud, even when it's unfair, especially when it's personal. You show them what real strength looks like." She folded into herself, a defeated slump in her shoulders. "I don't want Eva to be a headline, Lucas." Lucas softened, his voice gentle, reassuring. "Then remind the world that she's a child, not a scandal. That her joy, her growth, is more important than their gossip." There was a moment of profound silence, thick with unspoken fears and monumental possibilities. Then Lucas asked, his voice softer, a question laden with his own willingness to sacrifice. "Would it help if I stepped back?" Mayline turned to him so fast he barely saw it coming, her eyes wide with alarm, a flash of fierce possessiveness. "Don't you dare." his breath caught, surprised by the intensity of her reaction, the raw emotion in her voice. She took a step closer, her hand reaching out, almost touching his arm, a silent plea. I don't care what the press says. I don't care what Greg says. I care what she says. She pointed toward the playroom, where Eva's soft humming could be faintly heard, a melodic counterpoint to the external chaos. And she says your name like it means safe. I won't take that from her. Not again. Not ever. Lucas's voice lowered, a profound understanding passing between them, a silent, powerful affirmation. Then we face this together. But outside, the storm had already arrived, not just in the metaphorical sense. Protesters stood on the sidewalk, their angry shouts and chants muffled only slightly by the building's thick walls, their signs waving furiously. Janitor's agenda: protect Eva from PR experiments. We trusted her. She betrayed us. Reporters crowded the entrance, microphones bristling like an angry forest, cameras flashing like a relentless assault. Photographers with long lenses snapped every moment, capturing every flicker of emotion, every detail. Inside the gleaming, minimalist boardroom, the atmosphere boiled with barely contained rage. Greg Stanton paced at the head of the long glass table, his face a mask of furious disappointment, his words sharp, calculated. We gave you every opportunity to rebuild your image, Madeline, he snarled, his voice tight with barely contained rage. But instead, you doubled down on the drama. You invited scandal. I invested in people, Madeline said evenly, her voice calm amidst the storm, her gaze unwavering as she met Greg's furious stare. You invested in a liability, Greg snapped, his eyes flashing, glaring at Lucas, who stood quietly by Madeline's side, a silent, unmoving presence. He may be noble, but he's not qualified. He is a distraction, a risk to everything we've built. Lucas didn't speak. Not yet. Greg turned to the board members, his voice rising, imbued with a manipulative urgency, playing on their fears of financial instability. This center, this Ward Hale room, is a passion project. It's become a circus. Donors are pulling their funding. Our stock has dropped significantly in the last hour. We can't afford another week of this negative media attention. Madeline stood, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering, her quiet strength radiating through the tense room. Then I resign, she declared, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the murmurs. Gasps echoed around the table, a collective intake of breath. Greg smirked, a cruel triumph in his eyes. Smart move, Madeline. A graceful exit is sometimes the best strategy. But she wasn't done. Her gaze hardened, her voice rising with a new, unyielding power. I resign from you. Not from this. Greg's brow furrowed, his smug expression faltering, a flicker of genuine surprise in his eyes. I've built boardrooms. I've negotiated billion-dollar contracts. I've commanded global industries, Madeline continued, her voice gaining a profound, emotional resonance that silenced the room. And not once did I feel as proud as I did watching my daughter say hope in yellow paint. Not once did I feel as truly accomplished. Her voice cracked, a raw emotion, but she held steady, her resolve ironclad, her conviction absolute. I was wrong about what leadership means. I was wrong about what true value is. But I'm not wrong about this place. This center. This vision. She turned to the board members one by one, her gaze holding each of them accountable, challenging their narrow definitions of success. Fire me if you need to protect your stocks, if you need to appease your shareholders. But I'm not walking away from the only thing in my life that's finally growing, the only thing that truly matters. She looked at Lucas, a silent, profound declaration in her eyes, a shared history in that single glance. And I'm not walking away from the man who reminded me that love doesn't ask for permission. It just is. Then, head held high, shoulders back, she turned and walked out of the boardroom, leaving a stunned, echoing silence in her wake. A thunderclap of resignation, not from a position, but from a life that no longer served her soul. Lucas found her minutes later, sitting alone on the concrete stairs behind the building, the cool, hard surface a stark contrast to the opulent boardroom she'd just abandoned. Her hand shook, a visible tremor despite her outward defiance. He sat beside her, his presence a quiet, unwavering comfort. You sure about that exit? He asked softly, a hint of admiration in his voice for her incredible courage. No, she said, a small, choked laugh escaping her lips, tinged with a raw vulnerability. But I'm sure about you. Lucas looked at her, his heart swelling with a profound mix of awe and affection. That may be the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me. She smiled through a tear, a fragile, beautiful thing, her eyes shining with newfound clarity. "You know what scares me most?" "What?" he asked, ready to listen, ready to hold her fear. "That I didn't just fall in love with you. I grew into it. And that kind of love, it feels like it has roots." He was quiet for a beat, absorbing her words, then whispered, "Good. That means it's strong. Strong enough to weather any storm." A moment passed, then another, the quiet broken only by the distant sounds of the city, the fading echoes of the protest. She looked up, her gaze searching his, a flicker of renewed fear. "If we lose everything, funding, support, media favor, what do we do?" Lucas reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, a child's drawing. Eva's. 3 figures holding hands, one in a red dress, one with curly hair, one with glasses, and in the corner, a sentence in shaky handwriting, painstakingly formed. "Don't go. Stay blue." He handed it to her. "That's what we do," he said, his voice firm, resolute. "We stay." Maline clutched the paper to her heart, the simple drawing a powerful talisman against the storm, a beacon of their unwavering commitment. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like breaking. She felt like fighting, empowered by a love that had found its roots, strong and true. Rain was falling in sheets the morning Maline called the press conference. It wasn't soft, forgiving rain, a gentle drizzle meant to cleanse and symbolize new beginnings. This was a full-throated storm, a relentless downpour, the kind that made people stay inside, huddle under shelter, unless they had something truly profound, something worth standing in the cold, unyielding rainfall. The sky above the Ward Hale room was a bruised, uniform gray, reflecting the tempest that had engulfed Maline's corporate world. Maline stood at the podium in front of the Ward Hale room, directly facing the onslaught of the storm and the relentless gaze of the media. Her blonde hair, usually meticulously styled, was pulled back tightly in a simple ponytail, already glistening with rain. There was no makeup, no designer coat, just a plain gray sweater and rain-slicked jeans of stark, raw authenticity that stripped away all pretense of her former corporate persona. She looked like a woman who had nothing left to sell but everything to say, every word imbued with the weight of her conviction, her sacrifice. Cameras, their lenses wide and hungry, pointed at her like cannons, flashes popping erratically through the rain-streaked air. Microphones, bristling with furry wind covers, stood at attention like soldiers, capturing every syllable, every tremor in her voice. But Lucas, watching from the sidelines with Eva and Becca, huddled under a small awning, saw something different. He saw a mother, a fighter, a woman finally stepping into her truth, not to defend herself from accusations, but to invite others in, to share a piece of her vulnerability, her profound transformation. Maline gripped the edges of the podium, her knuckles white against the dark wood, and exhaled, a visible cloud of breath misting in the cold, damp air. Her gaze swept over the sea of faces, the eager journalists, the skeptics, the few who looked genuinely curious. "I've been asked by my board, by my PR team, by my investors, to explain myself," she began, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, her words cutting through the patter of the rain. Click, flash, murmurs rippled through the gathered reporters, a low, expectant hum. She went on, her voice gaining strength, imbued with a quiet, unwavering power. "To explain why I allowed my daughter to be seen in public. Why I let a man without a medical license become her closest confidant. Why I, the CEO of a billion-dollar company, would kneel on the floor and paint stars on a wall." She paused, her gaze narrowing, scanning the crowd, challenging their narrow definitions of what was acceptable, what was professional. "I could give you a statement, a bullet-pointed defense, a meticulously crafted narrative designed to control public perception." Her voice hardened slightly, imbued with a fierce, quiet defiance. "But I won't, because I'm not here to explain myself. I'm here to remember who I forgot to be, and to remind you what truly matters." A hush fell over the crowd, the rain seeming to intensify the silence, making every word resonate with profound impact. "I forgot what it meant to slow down," she continued, her voice filled with a raw, unflinching honesty that cut through the professional cynicism of the press corps. "To truly see my child, not as a patient or a problem to be solved, but as a person. Brilliant, unique, worthy of a love that didn't demand she change to fit my world." Her eyes, though red-rimmed from sleepless nights and emotional strain, held a newfound clarity. "And I forgot what love looks like when it doesn't need to be polished or perfect, when it's messy and real and unconditional." She gestured behind her, toward the glass doors of the Ward Hale room, through which the vibrant colors of children's art could be glimpsed, a beacon of creativity and freedom against the grey storm. And that man you all wrote about, her voice softened, a profound tenderness entering her tone, a public declaration of affection, the janitor. She paused, her gaze meeting Lucas's across the rain-soaked space, their eyes locking for a fraction of a second, a silent communion that spoke volumes. He taught me how to listen, how to kneel, how to meet my daughter where she is, not where I hoped she'd be. He taught me the true meaning of presence. She turned back to the cameras, her resolve ironclad. And if standing beside him, if embracing this truth, cost me everything I built from the top floor up, then maybe it's time I remembered that the foundation matters more than the penthouse. The reporters, usually a restless, interjecting throng, froze, their pens poised, their fingers still on camera triggers. No one dared interrupt the raw, emotional confession, the profound and unexpected narrative she was weaving. Then Meline smiled faintly, a genuine, unforced smile that lit up her face despite the pouring rain, a testament to her inner strength. My daughter paints in colors. She used to choose only blue. Safe, quiet, small, the color of her comfort zone. Her voice dropped just above a whisper, imbued with profound meaning, a story unfolding in hues. But last week she added yellow, and she called it hope. Her voice thickened with emotion, a triumphant surge of pride. And if hope means kneeling in the dirt with someone who sees you fully, who loves you without labels, without conditions, then I'll stay there gladly. I'll make that my new boardroom. One reporter, visibly moved, slowly raised a hand. His usual aggressive demeanor softened. "Miss Ward, are you stepping down?" he asked cautiously, his voice tinged with a respect that hadn't been there moments before. She shook her head, her gaze firm, unwavering, her stance resolute. "No, I'm stepping up. Not as CEO of Wardcore Biotech, but as Eva's mother. As a woman who finally understands that leadership isn't about being followed or dominating. It's about making space for others to walk beside you, to empower, to nurture, to connect." A second hand shot up, the journalist's voice a little less confident. "And Mr. Hale, what's his role now? Is he an employee?" Meline smiled fully this time, a radiant, unburdened smile that illuminated her face despite the dreary weather, transforming her. "He's not an employee. He's not a consultant. He's not someone I hired." Then she looked straight into the camera, her message reaching beyond the lens, beyond the immediate audience, into the homes of millions, a statement of profound, unwavering commitment. His family. The words hung in the rain-soaked air, a powerful, undeniable truth. The video of the press conference went viral within hours, but not like before. This time, the comments weren't cruel, cynical, or dismissive. They were human. They were supportive. She said what no executive ever dares to admit, that heart matters more than holdings. We need more leaders who sound like mothers, who speak from the soul. I watched this with my autistic son beside me, and for the first time in a while, we both felt seen. "Thank you, Meline Ward." The message resonated, a powerful ripple effect of honesty, vulnerability, and courage, transforming public perception not just of Meline, but of what it meant to lead, to love, to connect. Lucas stood in the hallway of the center that evening, the sounds of children's laughter a comforting balm after the day's storm. Eva finger-painted alongside a boy with Down syndrome, their faces alight with shared joy. Becca skipped up beside him, her face bright, her excitement palpable. "She drew a sunset today with orange and red," she exclaimed, holding up a vibrant drawing. "Red?" Lucas asked, surprised. "She usually avoids red. She said it was scary." Becca grinned, her eyes sparkling with innocent wisdom. "She said red's not scary anymore, 'cause red means brave. And she feels brave now." Lucas blinked hard, his heart full, witnessing another profound step in Eva's journey, another layer of her world opening up. Meline appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame, arms crossed, but her eyes soft, devoid of their usual steel, replaced by a deep, gentle warmth. "You were right," she said, her voice quiet, almost a whisper. "About what?" Lucas asked, turning to her, his gaze steady. She stepped forward, her gaze direct, unwavering, filled with profound gratitude. "That this wasn't about me saving her. It was about letting her save me. It was about allowing myself to be broken open, to learn to listen." Lucas nodded. "You listened? That's all it took?" "No," she said, stepping closer, her hand reaching for his, her fingers intertwining with his, a silent promise. "It took you. Your presence, your stillness, your refusal to leave. your unwavering belief in her and in me." She held his hand, her touch firm and warm, a tangible connection. "I told the world you were family, but I want you to hear it from me, not from a podium, but from my heart." Her voice shook, tender and true, raw with emotion. "Stay, Lucas. Not for the center, not for Eva, not even for me, not in the way you might think." She paused, her eyes searching his, filled with a profound plea. "Stay because you want to, because this is where you belong." Lucas looked at her, his eyes glistening, a lifetime of unspoken longing and quiet hope finally finding its voice. "I've already unpacked," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, a profound declaration of commitment. Malline smiled, a radiant, unburdened smile that chased away the last shadows of the storm. Then Eva's voice, clear, strong, and full of newfound joy, called from inside the playroom, cutting through the quiet. "Daddy, Mommy, look, we made a rainbow." They turned. Eva stood in front of a giant paper canvas, streaked with color from one end to the other, a vibrant arch of childhood wonder. And in the center, 3 stick figures holding hands beneath the arch, painted in red, blue, and yellow. Malline's eyes welled with tears. Lucas whispered, his voice full of awe, "She's painting in every color now." Malline leaned her head against his shoulder, her heart overflowing. She finally feels safe enough to be all of herself. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed world, and inside, the room glowed. Not from lights, but from a profound, radiant love that had found its home. 6 months later, the Ward Hale room pulsed with life, a vibrant, joyful hum that resonated through its brightly painted walls and open spaces. The grand reopening, more a celebration of a new philosophy than a formal event, had attracted local schools, eager therapists, and families from across the state, all drawn by the inspiring story of Malline Ward's transformation and the unique, child-centered approach of the center. But it wasn't the festive banners or the colorful balloons that made the day truly special. It was the palpable hum of something deeper, something profoundly human, belonging. Every corner of the building, once a forgotten storage space, now breathed with intention and warmth, a testament to the power of a shared vision. In the central room, a vast, airy space filled with natural light, a circle of children sat barefoot on the polished wooden floor, their laughter and murmurs weaving a gentle tapestry of sound. They drew with chunky pastels on butcher paper spread across the floor, their small hands moving freely, uninhibited. No one asked them to sit straight. No one corrected how they held their crayons. Each line was its own language, a direct, unfiltered expression from the heart, and no one was forced to translate. No one was judged for their unique form of communication. It was a symphony of self-expression, a quiet revolution of acceptance. At the front of the room, Lucas knelt beside a boy with bright, curious eyes, who was tapping his pencil rhythmically on the floor, a soft, repetitive beat. "You feel it in beats, huh?" Lucas said with a gentle smile, his voice low and understanding. "Okay, let's make a drum line out of colors. What color is your favorite beat?" The boy's face lit up, a spark of understanding passing between them, a recognition of his unique rhythm being valued. Across the room, Eva floated between stations like a quiet breeze, her movements graceful and confident, a stark contrast to the coiled anxiety that had once defined her. Her signature blue was still present, a comforting constant woven into her shirt, her shoelaces, a subtle nod to her journey. But now, integrated effortlessly into her attire and her spontaneous bursts of art, were oranges, lilacs, even deep reds of vibrant rainbows stitched from courage, self-discovery, and newfound joy. And she spoke, not constantly, not with the incessant chatter of other children, but clearly, her voice gaining strength and nuance with each passing day. Today, she was giving a tour to 3 new kids, her small hand gesturing proudly, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. She pointed to the cozy reading nook, then to the textured wall filled with various sensory panels. "This one's like clouds," she whispered, her voice soft and inviting, letting them feel the soft cotton, the rough burlap, the smooth polished stone. Her face was alight with the joy of sharing her world, of guiding others into the safe space she had helped create. Malline watched from the glass door, her heart full, tears blurring her vision slightly, not tears of sadness, but of profound gratitude and overwhelming pride. She turned as a news anchor approached with a cameraman in tow, their faces expectant, eager for a soundbite from the CEO turned philanthropist. "Miss Ward, ready for your interview?" The anchor's voice was bright, professional, honed for media events. Malline smiled, a genuine, unforced smile that reached her eyes, but shook her head. No interviews today. But it's the grand reopening, the anchor protested, clearly disappointed, the opportunity for a high-profile story slipping away. I know, she said softly, her gaze sweeping over the bustling room, filled with happy children and engaged parents. That's why I want the focus to be on them, the kids, not me. She turned and walked back into the room, leaving a bewildered news crew in her wake, a subtle defiance of corporate expectations. She found Lucas showing Becca and Eva how to fold intricate paper stars, their heads bent in shared concentration. I think you just stunned the press, Lucas whispered as she approached, a teasing glint in his eye, a shared amusement at her quiet rebellion. I'm learning to let silence speak, Meline replied, a quiet wisdom in her voice, a profound lesson learned. Thanks to both of you. Becca grinned, a wide, infectious smile that brightened her whole face. She used to talk in PowerPoints. Now she talks in hugs. Lucas chuckled, a warm, resonant sound. Growth, he affirmed, his eyes twinkling. Then he looked at Eva, who had just finished folding her star, its point sharp and precise. She handed it to him, her small gesture imbued with deep meaning, and said simply, her voice clear and resonant, "For Blue." Lucas blinked back tears, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll keep it forever, Bluebird." Becca chimed in, holding up her own star, a vibrant yellow. I made one, too, but mine's for yellow, for hope. Meline took a breath, knelt down beside Eva, and with careful, deliberate movements, folded her own paper star, its color a rich, deep red. She handed it to Eva. Mine's red, for bravery, like yours. Eva placed all 3 stars together in her palm, a small, tangible constellation of their shared journey. Family, she said, her voice soft but firm, a profound declaration that echoed through the room. No one spoke for a moment, not out of awkwardness, but reverence, a profound respect for the simple, powerful truth Eva had just articulated. Then, from across the room, a soft bell rang. It was time. The ribbon-cutting ceremony had been scheduled, but Lucas had insisted it not be formal, a decision rooted in his philosophy. Let the kids cut it, he'd said. They built this. So now, standing proudly beside the vibrant rainbow mural at the front entrance, Eva and Becca held a large pair of oversized scissors together. The ribbon wasn't corporate blue. It was every color they'd ever used, a vibrant tapestry of shared experiences, blooming creativity, and courageous self-expression. Before they cut it, Eva, with a quiet strength that emanated from her small frame, turned to the gathered crowd. Without prompting, without a single cue, she cleared her throat. My name is Eva, she said, her voice shaking slightly, a fragile melody, but it didn't falter. I like colors, I like stars, and this place is for anyone who ever felt like a puzzle piece in the wrong box. Silence. Then applause broke like thunder, a wave of heartfelt emotion washing over the room. Tears flowed freely, smiles bloomed on countless faces, parents hugged their children silently, a shared understanding rippling through the crowd. The ribbon fell, a symbolic release, and the Ward Hale room officially opened. Not as a building, but as a movement. Not as a center, but as a beginning. That evening, as the stars began to pepper the darkening sky, the 4 of them shared dinner on the rooftop of the building. Pizza, sodas, mismatched paper plates, a simple, perfectly imperfect feast against the breathtaking backdrop of the glittering city lights, twinkling like scattered confetti below them. Becca chewed thoughtfully, her gaze sweeping across the urban landscape, illuminated by the distant glow. Do you think we'll always live near here? She asked, a child's gentle inquiry about the future. Lucas glanced at Meline, a silent question passing between them. She nodded, a soft, contented smile on her face. I think we'll always belong here. Our roots are here now. Eva leaned her head on Lucas's arm, utterly content, a profound sense of peace radiating from her. Home, she whispered, the single word encompassing everything. Lucas kissed the top of her head. That's right, Bluebird. Meline looked at the 3 of them, a tableau of love, her heart overflowing. The wind picked up gently, rustling her hair, blowing a folded paper star, one of Eva's creations, across the rooftop. She chased it, caught it, held it carefully in her palm, and whispered almost to herself, a profound realization. I never knew love could be this quiet and still say everything. Lucas stood beside her, his presence a comforting warmth. You know what the best part of this whole journey is? He asked, his voice low and warm, reflecting the golden light of the fading day. What? She asked, turning to him, her eyes searching his. I came into your world thinking I had to teach you how to kneel, how to find stillness. He turned to her, his eyes kind, filled with affection and deep admiration. But somewhere along the way, you learned how to stay. You learned how to root, how to be present, how to truly live. She touched his hand, her gaze meeting his, filled with a profound gratitude that words couldn't fully express. You didn't fix my daughter. You didn't fix me. You reminded us we were never broken. He smiled, his eyes shining. You just needed a place without labels and people who refused to leave. They stood hand in hand in the fading golden light, paper stars scattered at their feet like tiny wishes. A little girl who once hid in corners, lost in a world of overwhelming sensory input, now painted skylines, her imagination soaring. And a world that, despite its relentless noise and demands, had finally learned how to listen, how to slow down, how to connect. As the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, purple shadows over the city, Eva's voice, clear and full of innocent wonder, carried on the gentle breeze. Tomorrow, let's paint the sky. Lucas and Meline looked at each other, their smiles widening, a shared vision, a future unfolding in every vibrant hue. Yes, Meline whispered, her voice soft and true. A promise? Let's. Their journey, filled with unexpected turns, had brought them to a place where love was the loudest, most beautiful sound of all. If this story has touched your heart, even just a little, if it reminded you that love doesn't need to be loud to be powerful, then we would love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Leave your city, your country, or even just a heart emoji in the comments. We read every message, and we truly want to know how far our stories are reaching. And if this story brought you hope, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite destiny, please don't keep it to yourself. Share it, send it, let someone else feel seen too. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you never miss a story that might change your day or even your heart. Thank you. Truly. Thank you for giving us your precious time. We are honored to have you here. Until the next story, stay kind, stay human, and always, always listen.